The funny thing is here on Facebook, when I'm making a live stream, I never know when I'm really online or not, so I just keep on talking. And I keep on talking, and I don't know if this is gonna work or not. Facebook works in a strange way. Okay, the topic is fitting into Frum Israeli society. So what I cannot do in this stream, and what nobody can, is giving you a perfect advice or the perfect solution how to fit into Frum society after, let's say, you're making Aliyah. There is no solution, because it really depends on you. It depends on your personality as an individual. I can give you a brief overview about what to expect here. And it also depends on how Frum you are. If you consider yourself as Frum when you are Dati Leumi, national religious, like being a member of the so-called Mizrahi movement. And the Mizrahi movement itself here in Israel has many, many different sections. There's not only the Mizrahi movement, there are many, many different directions, and you have to see where and how you fit in, which is not easy at the beginning. Of course, when you are Haredi, so you know what you are, you know if you're Litvish, what kind of Litvish, whom to follow, and if you're Hasidic, so you don't really have this problem so much, especially when you speak Yiddish, so you don't have this language barrier. Whereas other Frum Jews from the diaspora making Aliyah, they have this huge language barrier, which can be really annoying and really difficult for you, especially when you are among the Mizrahi movement, like Dati Leumi. It can be really annoying, unless you're looking for, let's say, an American community. You have many American or Anglo communities here in Israel, also French communities, Spanish communities. So there's always a place for you where you can adjust or don't have the language barrier, at least you have the same kind of mentality. When you go into an Israeli place, never mind if it's a synagogue or if it's like a settlement, a village, whatever, you have this language barrier. And when you come here making Aliyah, so you're coming, as I said, with certain expectations. And sometimes it is difficult because the communities are already set. You know, there's a certain hierarchy, as you know from your home, synagogues, communities, whatever. So there is already a hierarchy. And I've seen people here from the States, they came and they wanted to be part of this hierarchy immediately, because they said, you know, at home in my community, I was like, whatever, the committee, whatever. And here it doesn't work. So you have a big language barrier here when you go into an Israeli community, because everybody speaks Hebrew, and everybody, you know, in Israel, there is a different mentality than, you know, from home. When you go into an American community, of course it may be easier for you. First of all, you don't have a language problem. You don't necessarily have a mentality problem. And in many cases, you just know each other. You know, American Jews from New York, or I don't know, New Jersey, Boston, even Florida, whatever, Los Angeles, many know each other. Or they have common friends, they have mutual friends, they have, I don't know, relatives. So you basically have heard about each other or know each other. It is much easier to fit in a place like Jerusalem, because you have a huge variety of places to go to. If you don't like this synagogue, so you go to the next synagogue. So you have to find your place, and you will always find your place. And in Jerusalem, it's also, every neighborhood in Jerusalem is different. Every neighborhood has a different kind of residents. And by the way, if you are into Chabad, you find here in Jerusalem, almost in every neighborhood, you have a Chabad house. Some are Meshichistim, or many are Meshichistim, but you also find other things. So it is much easier to move into a city. About Tel Aviv, you also have different places, but you have a much larger variety and a more vital variety in Jerusalem. Or for instance, if you are Anglo, many Anglos make Aliyah to Tzvat, to northern Israel, where you have like a very nice English speaking community, but when you're considering to move to Tzvat, you should be aware of the fact that there are no jobs, or rarely any jobs. But in Jerusalem you have, I don't know, hundreds, 1,000 different kinds of communities, so there will be a place where to fit in. So another issue is also to choose your neighborhood. If you want a Frum neighborhood, so you have to see what your approach is. As I said, if you're Dati Leumi, if you are Haredi, so there are different neighborhoods available here in Jerusalem, so you have to see how you fit in. And you can be, you can be free and live as an individual in Jerusalem, in the communities, not in all communities, but of course when you live in like a Haredi community, you have to adjust much more than living in a Dati Leumi community. But when you choose to live, let's say in a settlement, and I'm talking about Dati Leumi settlement, there are also secular settlements in Israel and also Haredi settlements in Israel. But when you, let's say, you decide you want to move to a Dati Leumi, like a Mizrahi settlement, I know some people there, and I've known some people there in the past, and I've been to a few, briefly. I always find this annoying, because maybe it's annoying to me because I'm an introvert, but in this Dati Leumi communities you have to be in a way kind of society. And if you are not, so you are an outsider and they consider you as strange and you don't really fit in, you're always a little outside, so people may think you are, I don't know, you're just weird or something like this. So you always have to adjust, and there is pressure to adjust in those settlements, and it's not easy, at least not for me. Maybe for you, maybe you just fit in, you have to see, but it's not easy for me as an introvert to fit in, because I like to tell my opinion, and I'm not sheep following some leaders, some self-appointed leaders in the settlements. So you always have to be aware, especially when you move to a settlement, or even to a small, they are actually building it now, a neighborhood, Dati Leumi neighborhood in Jerusalem. It's a very small one, next to Jabal Mukaber. So when you move there, you always have to be aware of the fact that you're going to enter some society pressure. You have to fit in. If you don't fit into the mentality, and it's not enough to be Frum or Dati Leumi, to be national religious. This is not enough. You have to communicate and deal with people who have already set up leaders, so to speak. Let's call it leaders, like a kind of elite. And this elite of the settlement is going to tell you, we were here first. And it is us making the rules. And you have to follow the rules. So if you are this type of person that doesn't mind following rules, so you are okay. You just, you live your life, Those people, they don't tell you what to do in your daily life, but they kind of run the settlement, but you cannot go against them. There is no way. There is no way to go against them. And the problem is when you mess around with this elite, the self-appointed elite of the settlement, you're in trouble. Because other people will stop talking to you and they just ignore you. I mean, what kind of a life is this? It could also happen in Haredi society, if you live in a Haredi neighborhood. So you also have to adjust. And every community has a certain kind of hierarchy already, or maybe a certain kind of elite you have to follow. And to tell you the truth, I have problems with that. If you are fine with it, you're going to say, the elite or the leaders, the hierarchy, the top of the hierarchy, can do whatever they want. You know what, I'm going home, I'm closing my door, and you know what, leave me alone. Fine, if you can do that. But I'm this type of person, and you will see this later on in my upcoming streams, that I do have my own opinion. And I like to say it. Not all the time, but when people really go on my nerves, I'm going to speak up. I'm not taking this. And I'm not the type to move into a tight community. And I don't want to be part of a tight community. Once, I'm not saying the name of the group, but once a Chassid came up to me and he told me, he's like in his 70s, I suppose, and he told me that when he was young, he found the perfect shidduch for him, the perfect woman, and he wanted to marry her. So he went to his Rebbe because he had to ask for approval or permission, whatever you call it. And the Rebbe said, no, you can't marry her, or you shouldn't marry her. So the Chassid listened to his Rebbe and did not marry the woman. He never found another perfect shidduch until he was in his 70s. He never had children. He was not married, although he wanted to get married, but he was never married his whole life. He doesn't have children. And I asked him, you know what? Why didn't you just marry the woman? Okay, the Rebbe says no, or you shouldn't, whatever. He doesn't give his approval, but why didn't you marry the woman? No, I would have just done whatever I wanted. And he said to me, this is why I'm part of a Hasidic group and you are not. Because you don't listen to the Rebbe. The Rebbe is right. And although I didn't like the Rebbe's decision, I didn't do it. I followed his advice, or his order. So I would have not done this. And it's very, very difficult here in Israel. In the States, it's, you have your community, you are part of a community. Also, of course, you also have hierarchies. But maybe it's easier for you to deal with it because you were born into that society. You were born into this mentality, into this mindset, and you've been there all your life. Suddenly you come here and everything is a little different. Of course it's easy to choose for you, let's say as an American, of course it's easy for you to choose an American community here. There are plenty. As I said, in Jerusalem, here where I live in Abu Tur, in the Abu Tur neighborhood. There's nothing American here, but next door, so to speak, in Baka, in the Baka neighborhood, it's full of American communities. And they are working and everybody seems to be happy. You can go from one synagogue to the other, whatever. So it's very easy for you to find something. But, once you make Aliyah, you should also adjust to Israeli society and go to Israeli places and not only be in your, in your Anglo bubble. But you have to choose what's best for you. And as I said, there is no perfect solution, and you have to see what kind of a person you are. What's your character, and where do you feel, especially where do you feel welcome, and where you feel comfortable. And it's not always the place. I would suggest, if you are planning to move to a village, let's say, or a settlement, especially when you are national religious or something like modern national religious, whatever you call it, you should check out the place, talk to people, and try to find out if this is really what you want. Because when you are in a place like Jerusalem, for instance, and you are part of a community and there is a hierarchy, in a city, there's always an escape. You can always escape. It's big, it's a big place, there are hundreds of thousands of people, so there's always an escape. But in a settlement, you are being watched all the time, let's put it this way, because it's a smaller place. So everybody knows everything, what is usually not the case in the city. You can keep your privacy. But in a settlement, everybody is talking, everybody's watching, everybody's behind the window, something like this. So it's much harder to get away, to have your individual life, because you are always, people are always creeping around and you are always being watched. You're always being under surveillance. And this is not a nice feeling. I could not adjust to this, although, living in a settlement is much cheaper than living in a place like Jerusalem. In terms of rent, in terms of, in terms of everything probably. Especially in terms of rent, in terms of estate prices, it is much, much cheaper. But for what price? And there are many, many things you have to take into consideration. And the first thing is that you should not come with such high expectations, and you should look around what's waiting for you, and you have to make up your mind if you can live with that. I know that there are people, who are not too happy living there, so you have a choice. You can move out, you can move away, move to another place. But this is always like cost. You have to find another apartment, whatever. Sometimes it's not so easy, especially when you have kids and they are in a certain kind of school. But it's not so easy here in Israel. Israel is a small place, and people talk and people know, and it's always easier to be in the city, where you're not being watched so much. This is all I have to say. And I could not live under the supervision and not deal with people who think that they are the head of the neighborhood, because I have my own life, I have my own opinion, and I would get in trouble with those people very fast. This is why I prefer paying much more rent and living in Jerusalem in a normal place, and I'm not part of any community. In my past, I wanted to be part of the Haredi community. I went to a Haredi seminary, like a yeshiva. For women, you call it seminary. I went to a Haredi seminary, and I even lived in a Haredi neighborhood. And I just realized I don't fit in, because I felt like I can't be creative, and I always have to fit in and please other people. And I'm not pleasing other people. I'm not this type of pleasing everybody else and trying to be so frum and just in order to please other people. Like I used to go to Meir Sheri many times, to many different places. And once I took another woman to a place in Meir Sheri. And afterwards I realized I shouldn't have done that. I took her to Meir Sheri, to this family for Shabbat, for Seudat Shabbat, for Shabbos meal. And everything was okay, but she pretended to be so frum she wasn't. She was national religious. She pretended to be so frum in order to please the host. And all the time, I took her a few times. All the time she did the same. She tried to please, or she did her best to please the host and pretend to be so frum. And then she started telling me, why don't you behave like this? Why are you not so frum? You shouldn't say this. You should sit like this. You should eat like that. And you should keep your mouth shut. And I never took her again. And also, at the same time, on the same day, on the same Erev Shabbat, the host told me not to bring her anymore. It all came together on one day. She told me not to bring her anymore. And the host said to me, you know why we accept you all the time and why we want you to come? Because you are honest. You don't make a show. But the one you bring, she makes a show, and it's so obvious. And she's lying because she's making a show. She's putting up a whole show, and she's not honest. So we don't want her. We rather prefer people who also, who are honest, who also speak up and who are just, real and honest, and not putting up a whole show. So actually this was very interesting to hear. I thought I'm the only one noticing that she put up a show. But as I said, you have to find your place. When you come here, sometimes it's not easy, sometimes it's very easy. But don't get disappointed too much. Look at it in an optimistic way and look around where you fit in, what you want to do. And don't take everything too seriously and be upset. Because when, in Israel, don't be too upset, don't be too American, don't be too whatever. Here we have a saying, we have an idiom called, in Hebrew, lasim paz. And lasim paz means something like, maybe someone offended you or someone said something to you and you are upset. You're offended, you're upset, you're angry, you are crying, whatever. But in Israel, lasim paz means, just carry on. Don't worry about it. Don't even think about it. Take it easy. He said something, forget about it. Just forget about it. Lasim paz, forget about it, F off, so to speak. And I'm going to continue with my life. And I'm going to be optimistic and I'm doing something else. So this person can, go to hell, so to say. So don't take everything too personal and don't be offended too easily. This is what you have to learn in Israel. So this is what I have to say today. And I'm going to talk about all those subjects much more in my following streams. And I would like to hear your opinion. Maybe you moved to a settlement or you moved somewhere and you didn't have any problems and you just feel welcomed and everything, everybody's happy. Okay, that's good for you, but there are also other people who are not. And I'm excited to hear your opinions, what you think about it, what your expectations were, if they were met, if they were not met, whatever. So I wish you Chodesh Tov. Today is Rosh Chodesh Kislev, so Chodesh Tov, and Shabbat Shalom. It's also Friday today, so Shabbat Shalom, and enjoy.